Japan's justice system allows for the death penalty. This means that, in certain cases, the court can sentence a person to death. This punishment is reserved for the most serious crimes. Japan's use of the death penalty has sparked debate both domestically and internationally. The death penalty is a complex issue with strong opinions on both sides. This essay aims to provide a factual overview of the death penalty in Japan. We will examine the legal framework, the execution process, and recent trends. This essay will also touch upon the ethical considerations surrounding capital punishment. Ultimately, readers are encouraged to form their own informed opinions on this sensitive topic. Japanese law lists several crimes that can result in a death sentence. These crimes are generally considered to be the most severe offenses. One such crime is murder. This includes intentional killing and murder committed during other serious crimes. Another capital offense is robbery, resulting in death. This occurs when someone dies during a robbery, even if the death was accidental. Japan also punishes acts of terrorism with the death penalty. This includes bombings and attacks that result in loss of life. It's important to note that while many crimes are technically punishable by death, the sentence is not always given. Judges consider many factors when deciding on an appropriate punishment. These factors can include the severity of the crime, the intent of the perpetrator, and the impact on the victim's family. Inmates on death row in Japan face extremely harsh conditions. They live in solitary confinement, completely isolated from the outside world and other prisoners. Their cells are small and sparsely furnished, with minimal comfort. Contact with the outside world is very limited. Prisoners on death row have restricted access to visitors. They are allowed only infrequent and closely monitored visits from family and legal counsel. Their daily routines are highly regimented with little opportunity for work, education, or recreation. The mental toll of death row is significant. The constant threat of execution, combined with the isolation and lack of stimulation, can have severe psychological effects. Amnesty International and other human rights groups have criticized these conditions, arguing that they constitute cruel and inhumane treatment. The execution process in Japan is shrouded in secrecy. Prisoners are given very little notice before their execution. Often, they are told only hours before it is carried out. This practice has been criticized by human rights groups, who argue that it is inhumane and adds to the mental anguish of the condemned. The method of execution in Japan is hanging. The prisoner is blindfolded and led to the gallows, where a noose is placed around their neck. The execution is carried out by a team of prison officers, and a doctor is present to pronounce death. After the execution, the prisoner's family is notified. They are given the option to claim the body for burial. The Japanese government does not release statistics on the number of executions carried out each year. This lack of transparency has further fueled criticism from international observers. Section 5. Recent executions and trends. While the exact number of executions is not publicly available, Japan has, consistently carried out the death penalty in recent years. The country remains one of the few developed nations that still enforces capital punishment, a practice that has been met with both domestic and international scrutiny. In 2018, Japan executed 15 individuals, marking a significant peak in the number of executions carried out in a single year. This was the highest number in a decade, and it sparked international condemnation. Various human rights organizations and foreign governments voiced their concerns, urging Japan to reconsider its stance on the death penalty. Human rights groups, including Amnesty International, have been particularly vocal, calling for a moratorium on executions. They argue that the death penalty is inhumane, and that there is always a risk of executing innocent people. One high-profile execution in recent years was that of Shoko Asahara, the leader of the Aum Shinrikyo cult. Asahara was responsible for orchestrating the 1995 sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway, an incident that left 13 people dead and thousands injured. Asahara and several of his followers were executed in 2018, bringing an end to a case that had deeply shaken Japanese society and left a lasting impact on the nation's collective memory. The executions were met with mixed reactions within Japan. While some saw it as a necessary step towards justice, others questioned the morality and effectiveness of capital punishment. Despite international pressure and ongoing debates, Japan has shown no indication of abolishing the death penalty. The government maintains that it is a necessary punishment for the most serious crimes. The current administration argues that the death penalty serves as a strong deterrent against heinous crimes and that it reflects the will of the Japanese people, who largely support its continued use. They believe that the threat of capital punishment helps to maintain public order and safety, deterring others from committing similar acts. As such, the death penalty remains a contentious yet firmly entrenched aspect of Japan's criminal justice system. Section 6. The role of the Minister of Justice. The Minister of Justice plays a crucial role in Japan's death penalty system. This role is not just administrative but deeply intertwined with the ethical and legal fabric of the country. They have the sole authority to sign execution orders, a responsibility that carries immense weight and consequence. Before doing so, the minister carefully reviews each case to ensure that the sentence is justified. This involves a meticulous examination of all available information. The minister considers various factors, including the nature of the crime, the severity of the offense, and the impact on the victims and their families, the evidence presented at trial, and any mitigating circumstances. These could include the defendant's background, mental health, and any signs of remorse or rehabilitation. They also meet with advisors and legal experts to discuss the case in detail. This collaborative approach ensures that multiple perspectives are considered. This process is designed to ensure that the death penalty is only used in the most exceptional cases, where the crime is deemed particularly heinous, and the evidence overwhelmingly supports the sentence. However, critics argue that the minister's decision-making process lacks transparency. They point out that the public has little insight into how these life-and-death decisions are made. The criteria used to decide whether or not to sign an execution order are not publicly available. This secrecy fuels concerns about the fairness and consistency of the system. This lack of transparency has led to concerns about potential bias and inconsistency in the application of the death penalty. Critics call for more openness and accountability to ensure that justice is truly served. In response, some have suggested reforms to make the process more transparent, such as publicizing the criteria for execution orders and involving independent oversight. These proposed changes aim to build public trust and ensure that the death penalty, if used, is applied fairly and justly. The role of the Minister of Justice, therefore, remains a pivotal and highly scrutinized position within Japan's legal system. Section 7. International Perspective. Japan's use of the death penalty has drawn criticism from many countries and international organizations. Most developed nations have abolished capital punishment, citing human rights concerns and the risk of executing innocent people. The European Union, for example, has repeatedly called on Japan to abolish the death penalty. They argue that it is a cruel and inhumane punishment that violates the right to life. Human rights groups like Amnesty International have also campaigned against Japan's use of capital punishment, documenting cases of unfair trials and harsh treatment of death row inmates. Despite international pressure, Japan has defended its use of the death penalty. The government argues that it is a sovereign nation with the right to determine its own laws. They maintain that the death penalty is a necessary tool for maintaining law and order and deterring serious crime. Section 8. Ethical Considerations. The death penalty is a deeply ethical issue that has been debated for centuries. It touches on fundamental questions about justice, morality, and the value of human life. Proponents argue that it is a just punishment for certain crimes, particularly those that are heinous and egregious. They believe that the death penalty serves as a powerful deterrent, preventing others from committing similar acts out of fear of the ultimate punishment. Additionally, supporters claim that it provides closure and a sense of justice for the families of victims who have suffered unimaginable loss and pain. Opponents of the death penalty argue that it is cruel and inhumane, regardless of the crime committed. They emphasize the moral implications of taking a human life as a form of punishment. They point to the fact that innocent people have been sentenced to death and executed, highlighting the fallibility of the justice system. Critics also argue that the death penalty is not an effective deterrent. Studies have shown that crime rates do not significantly decrease in regions where the death penalty is enforced. Furthermore, they contend that it does not bring true closure to families of victims, as the loss and grief remain long after the execution. The ethical debate over the death penalty is complex, involving legal, moral, and emotional dimensions. There are no easy answers, and the issue continues to divide public opinion and policymakers alike. It is a deeply personal issue, one that requires individuals to reflect on their own beliefs, values, and experiences. Forming an opinion on the death penalty involves grappling with difficult questions about justice, retribution, and the sanctity of human life. Each person must navigate these ethical waters in their own way, considering the broader implications for society and the legal system. Section 9. Conclusion. Japan's death penalty system is characterized by secrecy, strictness, and a strong emphasis on retribution. Despite international criticism and calls for abolition, Japan remains one of the few developed countries that continues to use capital punishment. The debate over the death penalty in Japan is likely to continue for the foreseeable future. As the nation grapples with its own values and weighs the arguments for and against capital punishment, the international community will undoubtedly continue to watch closely.